I've lived through hard moments in my life. But nothing. Not unemployment, not single fatherhood, not the quiet nights when fear kept me awake, ever hit me as violently as the moment my daughter tugged on my sleeve, pointed toward a black Bentley idling at the curb, and whispered with a trembling curiosity that sliced through the air like a blade, "Daddy? Is that Mommy?" That one question, so innocent, so small, felt like a fist closing around my throat, dragging the past out of the grave I had spent 6 long years piling dirt over. I didn't know how to answer her. I didn't even know how to breathe. My name is Marcus Thompson, and for the last several years my life has been defined not by success or comfort or stability, but by a constant fight to give my daughter the world even when I could barely hold my own together. I had once been an accountant with a predictable future, a 5-year plan, and a woman I believed I'd spend my life with. But layoffs don't ask permission, love doesn't always stay, and dreams can crumble quietly. One overdue bill, one failed interview, one lonely night at a time. These days, I navigate life with my back against the wall and my daughter's hand in mine, hoping that between my exhaustion and my determination, I can build something strong enough to keep her safe. That afternoon, at Riverside Park, just before everything shifted, I had been doing what I always did, pretending I wasn't tired, pretending her giggles lifted the weight on my shoulders, pretending that a few minutes of sunshine would erase the dark cloud hanging over my bank account. Emma was laughing on the swing, her curls bouncing as I pushed her higher, the sunlight catching her eyes that looked so much like someone I tried not to think about. Her joy always made me feel lighter, even if only for a moment, and I let myself settle into the illusion of peace, believing the world could leave us alone for just one day. But the world didn't. The deep, polished purr of an engine built for people with wealth thicker than my entire yearly income cracked the moment like lightning. A Bentley doesn't belong in our neighborhood, not near old swings and worn-out sneakers. It rolled to a stop with the kind of confidence only money has, its mirrors catching the afternoon light in sharp, cold glints. I didn't give it more than a passing glance at first. People with money never stop for long here. They stay in motion, untouched, untouchable. What made me freeze wasn't the car. It was my daughter's sudden silence. The swing slowed behind me, the chains creaking as Emma stared, really stared, toward the car with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. A 6-year-old shouldn't look at a stranger that way. I followed her gaze, and when my eyes landed on the woman stepping onto the sidewalk, the world around me dropped out. Sophia Sterling. There are names that never lose their weight no matter how many years pass. Names that cling to your ribs, scratch at your memory, haunt you in the quiet hours of the night. She was one of them. The woman who once held my hand and spoke about our future as if it was something carved in stone. The woman who collapsed under the pressure of becoming a mother. The woman who vanished when Emma was only 4 months old, leaving behind a letter and a silence so cold it took years for me to thaw. Seeing her now felt unreal. Her hair was shorter, styled into the sharp elegance of someone who makes million-dollar decisions before breakfast. Her clothes fit like they'd been stitched for her body alone. She looked powerful, untouchable, until she raised her eyes and saw Emma. Something inside her broke. Tears, real ones, glimmered in her eyes, not the kind you wipe away to protect mascara, but the kind you try to swallow and fail. She clutched the car door like she needed something solid to keep her upright. My heart twisted painfully. Part of me wanted to protect Emma, and part of me wanted to scream for answers I buried years ago. Emma tugged on my sleeve again, softer this time. "Daddy, she looks like me." I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I only knew that if I didn't lie, the truth would rip through the fragile world I'd built for her. So I forced myself to swallow the panic rising in my throat and said the most cowardly sentence I could muster. "She's nobody important, sweetheart." Even as the Bentley pulled away, and the last traces of her perfume dissolved into the cool air, I felt the lie burn in my chest. I knew she wasn't nobody, and the way she looked at Emma, like she knew her, like she missed her, like she regretted something enormous, told me this wasn't an accident. This was the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. Why did Sophia look at my daughter like she knew her? And why did she look like she wished she hadn't left? I always believed the past could stay buried if I pushed it deep enough, if I kept the doors closed tightly enough, if I never let Emma wander into the parts of my heart I had locked away the day Sophia walked out of our lives. But the truth has a way of clawing itself back to the surface at the worst possible moment. And on the evening Emma went looking for a purple crayon in my bedroom, everything I had spent years hiding came crashing back with a force that rattled the walls of the life I'd built. It started so simply, so innocently, the way disasters often do. I was in the kitchen stirring a pot of pasta that threatened to boil over when Emma called from the hallway that she needed her crayon for the picture she was coloring. I yelled back that I'd help her find it in a minute, but she was already skipping toward my bedroom with the confidence only a child possesses, certain she could find it faster on her own. I should have gone after her. I should have remembered what was in that room and what one curious pair of hands could uncover. But I was distracted by the stove, by the day, by my own exhaustion, and by the time I reached the doorway, it was already too late. Emma was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her small frame surrounded by a storm of memories I had kept hidden for 6 long years. An old shoebox, the one I thought I had tucked far enough back on the closet shelf to remain untouched, lay tipped over beside her, photographs spilling out like secrets desperate for air. My heart sank to a depth I didn't know existed. The moment I had feared from the day Sophia disappeared was staring back at me in my daughter's hands. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't apologizing for the mess. Her entire focus was on a single photo she held so carefully, as if it were something fragile. She studied it with a seriousness far beyond her 6 years, her brow furrowed, her eyes bouncing between the picture and her thoughts as she turned it slightly to catch the light. When she finally spoke, her voice wasn't loud or fearful. It was soft. It was curious, and it made my blood run cold. "Daddy, who is this pretty lady with you?" I sank onto the floor slowly, as if moving too quickly might shatter me. I reached for the scattered photos with trembling hands, but Emma pulled the one she held closer to her chest, unwilling to let me take it before she understood what it meant. I didn't need to see it to know which picture it was. There was only one I kept, the last photo of Sophia and me before our world collapsed. We were standing under a tree at a company picnic, her head resting on my shoulder, her smile soft and unguarded, my hand placed over the small swell of her stomach. We looked happy. We looked hopeful. We looked like people who believed life would unfold gently. Emma held the picture at arm's length and studied it with the kind of focus that made my heart ache. "She has eyes like mine," she murmured, "and her hair looks like mine when it's not in the sun." She lowered the picture slightly, tilting her head as she examined my younger face in the photo and then looked at me now. "And you're smiling different, Daddy. Like how you smile when you watch me on the swings." I tried to speak, but the words stuck to my throat like glue. All the excuses I'd prepared over the years, when I thought she'd be older, wiser, stronger, dissolved in an instant. Emma continued staring at the woman in the photo, the woman whose absence I'd tried to compensate for with twice the love, twice the patience, twice the presence. Then she whispered the words that cut straight into the place I feared most exposing. "She looks like someone I know." My pulse thudded painfully. "Emma, honey, we should put these away." But she wasn't listening. She was piecing things together with a clarity I wasn't ready for. She looked up at me, her eyes so full and earnest that it felt like she could see everything I was trying to hide. "Daddy, this is the lady from the park, isn't it?" My breath caught. All the walls I had built began to crack. She had noticed the resemblance at the park, but now she had proof in her hands, and all my lies suddenly looked paper thin. Emma wasn't guessing. She was remembering, recognizing, understanding. I could see the moment the truth clicked inside her. Her small fingers tightened around the photograph, and when she spoke again, her voice trembled. Not with fear, but with something far more devastating. "Daddy, is this my mama?" Her question hung in the air between us, heavy enough to crush me. I had always known this moment would come, but not today. Not at 6 years old. Not with pasta boiling over in the kitchen and my daughter sitting on the bedroom floor holding the one memory I had tried so hard to bury. Everything inside me twisted as I stared at her, knowing that whatever I said next would change her world forever. And in that unbearable silence, I realized there was no way to protect her from the truth anymore. There are moments in life when the world seems to stop. Not with noise, not with chaos, but with the quiet, devastating weight of a truth you can no longer outrun. As I sat on the bedroom floor across from my daughter, watching her cradle the photograph of a woman she had unknowingly been searching for her entire life, I felt something inside me fracture. Her innocence, once a shield that allowed me to protect her from the uglier parts of our story, now stood before me like a mirror, reflecting everything I had tried to hide. And there was no more space left to lie, no more excuses left to borrow, no more time left to postpone the inevitable. The words she had asked, simple, quiet, heavy, echoed between us with an intensity that made my chest tighten. "Daddy, is this my mama?" I had always imagined this moment happening years from now, when she was older, when she could handle the truth without breaking into pieces I wouldn't know how to pick up. But she was only 6, sitting barefoot on my bedroom carpet, holding a photograph of a woman who had disappeared before she could speak her first words. And she was waiting for me to tell her who that woman truly was. I took a slow breath, one that felt like dragging a blade across every tender part of my heart, and nodded. "Yes, Emma," I said, my voice rough and unsteady. "She's your mother." Even speaking the word, mother, felt strange after all this time, like picking up something delicate that had gathered dust for years. Emma didn't move. She didn't gasp or cry or drop the photo. She just stared at it, her small fingers gripping the edges with a quiet intensity I didn't know a child could hold. "So," she whispered, her eyes shifting slightly. "The lady from the park, that was her?" "Yes," I said again, softer this time. "That was her." Emma's lashes fluttered as she looked down at the picture once more. I could see her mind racing, stitching together moments she hadn't understood before. The familiarity she sensed at the park, the strange sadness she saw in the woman's eyes, the tension in my voice when I said she was nobody. She wasn't just putting together a puzzle. She was realizing a piece of her identity had been missing, hidden from her, sealed behind a door I had refused to open. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, not accusing, not angry, just heartbreakingly sincere. I swallowed hard. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that you were trying to protect her from a kind of pain you couldn't bear yourself? That you were terrified the truth would wound her deeper than any lie ever could? That you were afraid of the day she might look at you differently, not as her hero, but as the man who kept something so important from her? "I wanted to tell you," I murmured, choosing my words with the caution of a man defusing a bomb. "But I didn't know how, and I didn't want you to grow up feeling unwanted. None of what happened was your fault, Emma." Emma blinked slowly, processing my words with a seriousness far too old for her small frame. She turned the picture over, tracing her mother's face with her fingertip, and for the first time I saw something in her expression I had dreaded for years. Longing, not for answers, Those would come in time, but for the presence of a person she had never known she was missing. Why did she leave? The question came out so softly, it felt like it was trembling. The truth burned. I couldn't tell her everything. Not now. Not the panic, not the fear, not the crushing weight of postpartum depression that had swallowed Sophia whole. I couldn't tell her how her mother had sobbed into her hands night after night, terrified she wasn't good enough to be a mother. I couldn't tell her how the pressure of her career, her upbringing, her expectations had collided so violently that running away felt like the only way to breathe. A 6-year-old shouldn't carry the burden of adult failure. She was scared, I said gently. More scared than she knew how to handle. And she thought she couldn't take care of you the way you deserved. Emma's eyebrows pulled together, not in anger, but in confusion. Pure, innocent confusion. But I'm not hard to take care of, she whispered. No, sweetheart, I said, fighting the ache in my voice. You're the easiest child in the world to love. Your mama leaving wasn't because of you. It was because of what she was struggling with. Something inside her. Emma looked at me then. Really looked at me. Her eyes shining with an emotion I hadn't prepared for. Hurt mixed with hope. Sadness mixed with curiosity. She leaned closer, resting the photo in her lap like it was something sacred. Daddy, she said quietly, do you still love her? The question hit me like a punch beneath the ribs. What I felt for Sophia now was complicated. A tangled knot of old memories, unresolved anger, empathy for the pain she carried, and the remnants of a love that once felt so solid it could have held up the sky. I love you, I answered honestly. More than anything, and everything I do, everything I've done, has been for you. Emma nodded slowly, absorbing my answer even as a new thought seemed to form behind her eyes. She looked back at the photograph one more time before lifting her face toward mine. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it split the room open. I want her, she said. Why doesn't she live with us, Daddy? Her question landed with a force strong enough to shake the ground beneath me, because it wasn't just a question. It was the beginning of a storm I could feel coming, a storm I could no longer shield her from. There are truths we carry quietly, tucked behind the ribs, buried under the routines of survival. But while I was spending my days protecting Emma from a past I prayed would never return, I had no idea that the very woman I was trying to keep buried had already climbed back into our world. Not loudly, not through confrontation, but silently, from the top floor of a glass tower that overlooked the city like a kingdom she commanded. I didn't know it then. Not when Emma asked the question that changed everything. Not when I lied to her to keep her safe. But while I was fighting the ghosts of the past, Sophia Sterling was busy creating ghosts of her own. She wasn't just thinking about us. She was watching us, observing from the shadows, studying from a distance, trying to measure the damage of her choices from the comfort of her empire. Sophia had always been brilliant, dangerously so. Even before she fled, even before she left Emma in my arms, she had a hunger for achievement that pulled her toward the top, with the kind of ferocity I couldn't compete with. What I didn't know was that after she left us, that hunger consumed her completely. She climbed and climbed, rising through the ranks of Sterling Industries with a speed that made her a legend, until eventually the view from her corner office on the 52nd floor became a symbol of everything she had sacrificed. But skyscrapers have a way of magnifying emptiness. Her office was made of glass and steel, a perfect echo of her reputation. Unbreakable, polished, commanding. Assistants rushed to her with schedules, investors demanded her time, employees feared disappointing her, and from the outside, it looked like she had everything she ever wanted. Money that could move markets, influence that made powerful men nervous, a fiancé whose last name opened exclusive doors. Yet none of it filled the silence inside her. That silence had grown loud in the years she'd stayed away. But 3 months before she reappeared at the park, it became unbearable. The emptiness had begun digging claws into her, reminding her of the tiny face she'd left behind, the one with eyes just like hers. That was when she hired a private investigator. She didn't admit it to anyone, not even to herself, but she needed to know what had happened to the baby she abandoned in an apartment filled with half-packed boxes and fear. She claimed she was checking for health and safety, but the truth lived in the tremble of her fingers when she opened the reports. Emma's school records, Emma's medical reports, Emma's pictures, at the grocery store, at the library, at the park. And then there were the notes about me, Marcus Thompson, unemployed, struggling financially, but present. Always present. The PI wrote, "Child appears emotionally stable, father highly involved, attentive, protective." Every word cut through the armor she'd built around herself. Every page forced her to face the one truth she couldn't outrun. I had raised our daughter alone, and I had done it well. But nothing hit her harder than the pictures. Emma, bright-eyed, smiling, helping an elderly woman pick up her dropped belongings. Emma, racing across the playground while I chased after her. Emma, her curls bouncing, her joy radiating. That day, something inside Sophia cracked. She saw a child who didn't just survive without her, she thrived. And instead of relief, she felt grief. Grief for the moments she'd missed. Grief for the first steps she never saw. Grief for the first words she never heard. Grief for the birthday candles she never helped blow out. She started driving to our neighborhood after work, always parking far enough to watch without being seen. Her Bentley, an unmissable symbol of the life she chose over us, sat in the shadows while she watched Emma run, laugh, learn, grow. The first few times she came, she stayed inside her car, but eventually the guilt dragged her out, forcing her feet onto the pavement just to stand closer to the daughter she had convinced herself she didn't deserve. Then came the moment that shattered her. Emma saw an old woman drop her purse on the sidewalk and immediately ran to help her gather the scattered items. Sophia watched from the edge of her car, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the kindness, gentleness, and empathy her daughter carried naturally. Emma told the woman, "Just my daddy raised me, but he's really good at it." Those words crushed her. They weren't meant for her, but they destroyed her anyway. Her phone buzzed. Her fiancé, Alexander Reeves. Perfect suit, perfect teeth, perfect ambition, perfectly incapable of understanding anything that didn't come with a price tag. "You missed the Morrison meeting," he snapped. "We needed you there. This behavior is unacceptable." Sophia watched Emma climb onto the swing while I stood behind her, pushing gently, both of us laughing as her curls flew behind her like dark ribbons. "I had something more important," Sophia whispered into the phone. "More important than a $50 million deal?" She didn't answer him. She didn't have to. Because in that moment, watching her daughter reach out for the sky, she realized she was done pretending money could fill the void she created. She wanted Emma. She wanted the little girl she left behind. She wanted the chance she had once thrown away. And just as she stepped closer, just as she whispered a shaky breath of longing, Emma looked directly at her. Their eyes met from across the park. A child full of curiosity, a mother full of regret. And then Emma lifted her small hand and waved. The past wasn't done with any of us. And now Emma had seen her. There are nights that split your life into a before and an after. Nights when fear tightens its grip so fiercely around your throat that breathing becomes an act of will instead of instinct. For me, that night began with Emma standing in the hallway, her cheeks flushed an alarming shade of red, her eyes glassy, and her small voice trembling when she whispered, "Daddy, my head hurts." I pressed my hand against her forehead and felt a heat so intense it jolted straight through me. When the thermometer blinked back 104 Gorkumaun, the world around me blurred into panic. I didn't know that within hours, While I was fighting to keep Emma safe, the past I thought I had buried would walk straight through the hospital doors and turn everything upside down. I wrapped Emma in a blanket and carried her to the car, with my heart pounding so violently I could feel it in my teeth. We sped through the streets, every red light feeling like an enemy determined to slow me down. The emergency room was overflowing, the kind of scene where desperation clung to the walls, and every parent looked just as scared as I felt. I filled out paperwork with hands that wouldn't stop shaking while Emma lay limp against my shoulder, her breathing shallow, her body frighteningly hot. 2 hours passed before a nurse finally called her name. By then my nerves were stretched thin, my exhaustion clawing at me, my fear spiraling. They placed her on a gurney in a small examination room, hooking her up to monitors while I paced the hallway like an animal trapped in its own helplessness. I didn't notice the shadow at the end of the hall, didn't realize I was being watched until the soft echo of heels made me turn. And then I froze. Sophia. Standing there with a look on her face I had never seen before. Pure terror. Her breath was uneven, her hands trembling as if she'd run the entire way. I didn't understand how she even knew we were here until I saw her phone in her fist, screen lit with a call history I didn't need to read to understand. The PI had told her. He had called her the moment he saw me rushing Emma into the ER, and she had come. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, the words sharper than I intended, fueled by fear rather than anger. "I heard she was sick," she managed, her voice cracking. "Marcus, I just needed to make sure she was okay." "She doesn't need you," I snapped before I could stop myself. "Not now, not like this." Her eyes widened, wounded. "I'm her mother." The word ignited something painful inside me. For 6 years, she hadn't been anything but a memory Emma didn't even know she had. Now she wanted to claim the title, as if it had never broken her to carry it. Before I could respond, a small voice drifted through the open doorway. "Daddy?" I rushed inside, and Sophia followed, stopping just behind me as Emma blinked weakly at us. Her gaze drifted from my face to Sophia's, confusion flickering before recognition stepped in. Recognition she shouldn't have had, recognition born from a photograph she had studied like a clue to her own identity. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You're the woman who looks like me." Sophia's breath left her body in a single, shattered exhale. I expected her to break down. I expected her to run. I expected her to fall apart under the weight of being seen by the child she had left behind. But something else happened. Sophia stepped closer, slowly, as though approaching something holy rather than fragile. She reached out her hand, stopping just inches from Emma's. She was trembling, holding herself as if one wrong movement would send her crashing to her knees. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "Hello, Emma." Emma blinked again, processing, searching, trying to understand a face that felt strangely familiar. Her small hand lifted, unsteady, and she touched Sophia's wrist. It wasn't trust, it wasn't acceptance, it was instinct, the quiet instinct of a child recognizing something her heart understood before her mind could. Then, in a moment that stole the air from the room, Emma whispered, "Are you here to help me get better?" Sophia broke. The walls she'd spent years building around herself crumbled all at once, and the woman who had run from motherhood stood there now with a tenderness she could no longer hide. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm here." When Emma finally drifted into sleep, her fever still raging but her breathing softer, she held my hand with one small palm, and Sophia's with the other. The three of us stood there in the dim hospital room, connected for the first time since the day Emma was born. I watched Sophia watching our daughter. Not with fear, not with regret, but with something else, something that made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. For the first time in years, I wondered if Sophia was actually here to stay. There are moments in fatherhood when you realize you're no longer steering the story. You're simply trying to keep up with the truth your child has already embraced. For me, That moment arrived the day Emma sat up in her hospital bed, still pale and exhausted, and asked, in her small but determined voice, "Daddy, can the woman with my eyes come visit me?" I felt something tighten in my chest. I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to protect her from every risk, every disappointment, every ghost from the past that had the power to hurt her again. But when she looked at me with those earnest eyes, Sophia's eyes, I understood that Emma wasn't chasing fantasy. She was chasing identity. She was chasing the missing piece of her story. That was the only reason I called Sophia that evening. Not because I wanted her near, not because I trusted her, but because Emma deserved honesty, not the filtered version of life I'd tried to construct for her. Supervised visits only, I told Sophia firmly when she arrived at our door 2 days later. Emma was home now, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, still recovering. If she gets overwhelmed, confused, or upset, you leave immediately. Sophia nodded without argument, without her usual corporate authority, without anything but sincerity. "I'll do whatever you think is best." It was strange seeing her standing there, not the towering CEO, not the immaculate executive I'd once admired from afar, but a woman who seemed almost unsure of herself. She clutched a bag in her hands like it was evidence of her intentions. Inside the bag were books, not toys, not expensive gifts, but books about ocean creatures, bioluminescent fish, and deep-sea wonders, topics she remembered I used to read about during her pregnancy. Emma's face lit up when she saw the bright pictures. Her small fingers traced the glowing outlines of the angler fish. "Is this real?" she asked, amazement replacing exhaustion in her voice. "It is," Sophia said gently, kneeling beside her. "Some creatures live so deep in the ocean that they have to create their own light to survive." Emma tilted her head, absorbing the explanation with the intensity she always carried. "So they glow? Because it's dark?" "Yes," Sophia whispered. "Sometimes in dark places you have to make your own light." The room went quiet. Not heavy, not awkward, just quiet in a way that felt like healing had quietly slipped into the space between us. Sophia opened one of the books and read slowly, letting Emma stop her every few sentences to ask questions. Questions Sophia answered with patience I honestly didn't expect. She didn't rush. She didn't lecture. She didn't hide behind fancy words or complicated explanations. She simply showed up. Emma leaned closer as they flipped through the pages, her small shoulder brushing against Sophia's arm. I watched from the doorway, torn between relief and fear. This was what I had always wanted for Emma, a connection she had been denied. But watching them bond was also a reminder of the years Sophia had missed, the nights Emma had cried, the milestones she never saw. After they finished the book, Emma looked up and asked the question I feared would break everything open. "Why did you go away from my daddy?" Sophia froze, glancing quickly at me, her eyes searching mine for permission or guidance. But I refused to shield her. I refused to help her. This answer was hers alone to give. She took a breath, steady yet trembling. "I was scared," she admitted. "Not of you. Never of you. I was scared I wouldn't be good enough to be your mother. I thought leaving would hurt you less than staying and failing." Emma studied her face with surprising seriousness. "Daddy says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared." Sophia blinked, her eyes glistening. "He's right. It means you do the right thing even when you're scared," Emma added quietly, her voice softer now. "That's what Daddy always says." Sophia nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm trying to be brave now." It was the first time I had ever seen her vulnerability not as a weakness, but as something honest, painful, but real. This wasn't the polished CEO. This wasn't the runaway mother. This was a woman trying to rebuild herself in front of a child whose forgiveness she had not yet earned. Emma leaned back against the couch cushions, still processing everything, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the cover of the glowing fish book. Then she looked up at Sophia, with a clarity so sharp it cut the air around us. Her voice was calm. direct, unfiltered in the way only children can be. Are you going to stay this time? And in that moment, staring at those two faces, one pleading for truth and the other drowning in it, I realized this wasn't just a visit. It was a crossroads. For all of us, there are disasters you see coming, storms you can sense in the wind long before they arrive. And then there are the other kinds, the ones that detonate without warning, leaving you standing in the wreckage of a life that, moments earlier, felt almost safe. Ours came in the form of a single camera flash that neither Sophia nor I noticed in the moment. But that one photograph, that hidden shutter click, became the fuse that blew our fragile piece to pieces. It happened 3 days after Sophia's first real visit with Emma. I woke up that morning to pounding on my door, Mrs. Patterson from 3B clutching a newspaper as if it were a burning coal she didn't know how to drop. Her face was pale, her voice shaking as she shoved it into my hands. "Marcus, it's about Sophia and Emma." My stomach dropped before I even looked down. Splashed across the front page was a photograph of Sophia leaving our apartment building. Her hair immaculate, her expensive coat catching the light, her expression tight with worry. Behind her, barely visible in the corner, was me, holding Emma on my hip, both of us in the doorway. The headline was a punch to the gut. "Millionaire CEO abandoned secret baby, now wants her back." Beneath it were sub-headlines more vicious than I imagined possible. "Sterling Industries' shame. Who is the poor father in the picture?" Sources claimed the child was hidden for years. My hands trembled as I skimmed the words, lies twisted with fragments of truth, speculation paraded as fact, accusations layered with cruelty. The worst part wasn't even directed at Sophia, it was aimed at Emma. Illegitimate heir. Secret child. Abandoned infant. Words that had no business near a 6-year-old's name. I didn't even hear the reporters at first, not until I stepped into the hallway and saw them crowding the bottom of our stairwell. Microphones, cameras, flashes. They shouted questions the moment they spotted me. "Marcus, is it true you kept her from her mother? Is the child sick? Did Sophia pay you to stay quiet? Are you considering custody negotiations?" I slammed the door so fast the walls rattled. Inside, Emma stood clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide and frightened. "Daddy, why are people yelling my name?" I knelt, scooping her into my arms as fear surged through me. She was trembling. She thought she'd done something wrong. She thought she was the reason strangers were screaming outside her home. Later that day, the school called. Reporters had shown up there too. Children whispered to Emma. Grown-ups stared. By lunchtime, she hid in the school bathroom and refused to come out. I felt helpless, angry, and guilty. This was exactly what I'd always feared, my daughter getting crushed under the weight of a world she never asked for. Meanwhile, across the city, Sophia faced her own firestorm. According to her assistant, her phone didn't stop ringing. Investors demanded statements, board members questioned her stability, employees whispered about her secret past. But the worst conflict wasn't in her corporate world. It was standing right in front of her. Alexander Reeves, her fiancé, a man who viewed children as strategic assets and image enhancements. When Sophia stormed into his private office demanding answers for the paparazzi leak, Alexander didn't deny orchestrating it. He didn't apologize. He didn't even pretend remorse. He simply leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers, and said, "You need to stop panicking. This could actually work in your favor." Sophia stared at him, stunned. "In my favor?" "Public sympathy," he explained coldly. "A powerful woman reconnecting with her daughter after years apart? Investors love a redemption arc. Besides," his eyes narrowed, "you've already gotten too emotionally attached. At least let it benefit you." That was the moment, I later learned, when something inside Sophia snapped. The same woman who once could be bought with ambition, status, and power suddenly found herself disgusted by the very world she'd spent her life climbing toward. But I didn't know any of this yet. Not when I sat in our dim living room that night, holding Emma as she cried from fear and confusion, flinching every time a paparazzi flash lit our windows. I was furious, with the tabloids, with the photographers, with the broken system that punished a child for a mother's mistakes. And yes, with Sophia, because she had re-entered our lives quietly, emotionally, unpredictably. And now the fallout was everywhere. My anger twisted into something dangerous. Doubt. Had she come back for Emma? Or for her own guilt? Was this sudden effort genuine? Or a performance built on regret and impulse? Emma deserved stability. She deserved peace. She deserved a life that didn't include headlines and cameras and corporate scandals. And in that moment, surrounded by chaos, holding my daughter close, I realized something. If this continued, if Emma suffered even one more day because of Sophia's presence, I might have to cut Sophia off permanently, for my daughter's safety, for her innocence, for her heart. And as I held Emma trembling against my chest, I couldn't help but wonder, had Sophia already done too much damage to be part of our lives at all? There are wounds that come from the outside world. Paparazzi, tabloids, strangers with sharp tongues and sharper intentions. But nothing in my life prepared me for the kind of wound that comes from blood. I had always feared Sophia's return might shake our lives, but I never imagined the true danger would come from the people who taught her how to hide, how to run, how to love with conditions. I thought I understood what heartbreak looked like. Then I watched my daughter hear her own grandmother call her common, and something inside me snapped so violently I felt it in my bones. It happened the next day, after the media storm had finally begun to settle, but the emotional fallout still swirled around us. Sophia asked to speak with her parents, Richard and Eleanor Sterling, because the tabloids were threatening her position as CEO and the board was demanding answers. She thought she could handle them. She thought she was strong enough to face the two people who'd shaped her entire worldview. What she didn't expect was for Emma to be caught in the crossfire. And God help me, neither did I. I drove Emma to Sophia's apartment building because Sophia wanted to explain the scandal before the Sterlings saw us on their terms. She meant well, she really did. But the moment we stepped into her sleek, quiet apartment, I felt tension humming through the air like static before a lightning strike. And then they arrived. Richard Sterling walked in first, tall, stone-faced, wearing his arrogance like a tailored suit. Eleanor followed, dripping with designer jewelry and disdain, her chin lifted so high I wondered if she even remembered gravity applied to her. Their daughter's life was unraveling publicly, and yet the first words out of Eleanor's mouth were, "What a dreadful neighborhood." Sophia tried to stay calm, tried to explain why she had returned, why she wanted to be in Emma's life, why she wouldn't let the board dictate her role as a mother. But her parents didn't care about explanations. They cared about optics. Richard's voice was icy. "You are compromising our name, Sophia. The board is questioning your judgment. You jeopardize the company every time you indulge this maternal phase." Maternal phase, as if Emma were a hobby, as if motherhood were a trend. Sophia stiffened. "She's not a phase. She's my daughter." Eleanor scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "You had 8 months to mention that daughter before your engagement, but I suppose shame makes cowards of us all." Sophia's jaw tightened. I wasn't ashamed of Emma. "You abandoned her, didn't you?" Eleanor snapped. "That is the very definition of shame." The room went cold. Sophia faltered for the first time, her armor cracking. "I was sick. I didn't know how to—" "Oh, please," Eleanor interrupted sharply. "Spare us your sentimental nonsense. That child—" She paused. Her eyes landed on a framed photo of me and Emma on Sophia's coffee table. Her expression curdled. "Looks common," she declared, each syllable dripping with venom. "And her father, whoever he is, appears to be working class at best. Hardly the environment a sterling child should be raised in. My breath left my lungs. Common. A word meant to degrade, to belittle, to crush. A word no child should ever hear used about herself. And that's when I saw her. Emma. Standing at the top of Sophia's staircase, frozen. Silent. Tears streaming down her cheeks. She had heard everything. She clutched her backpack to her chest like a shield, her lip trembling as though trying to keep her heart from spilling out of her. Her voice was small, broken, trembling with humiliation she didn't understand. Daddy, she hates me. Her words cut through me sharper than any blade. Eleanor didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. Richard simply sighed, as though Emma's pain were an inconvenience. I didn't speak, I didn't yell, I didn't curse the people who deserved every cruel word I never said. I simply crossed the room, lifted Emma into my arms, and held her as she sobbed into my shoulder. No one, I whispered into her hair, gets to make you feel small. No one. She clung to me, shaking, her sobs muffled by my shirt. I could feel her heart break like a physical ache radiating through both of us. Behind us, Sophia's voice cracked, raw with fury. How dare you speak about my daughter that way? But Eleanor was unmoved. She'll disappoint you, Sophia. Children from broken homes always do. Sophia recoiled, as though struck. I didn't wait another second. I left. I carried Emma out of that tower of polished glass and poisoned love and swore I would never let her near that family again. Not while I had breath in my body. Back home, as I rocked Emma until her sobs softened into exhausted tremors, I felt something shift inside me. A protective instinct, so fierce it bordered on primal. If Sophia left again, if she let her parents near Emma, if she allowed even a sliver of that cruelty to touch my daughter's life, I was done. Done forgiving, done hoping, done believing she could change. And as I held Emma close, her small fingers gripping my shirt as if afraid the world might take me too, one truth carved itself into my soul. The next choice Sophia made would decide everything. There are decisions that look dramatic from the outside, and then there are the ones that feel like detonations from the inside. Quiet, controlled, but strong enough to tear down the entire architecture of a person's life. I always believed CEOs were made of strategy, calculation, and polished restraint. I never expected one to burn down her own empire just to prove she deserved a second chance with the daughter she had once abandoned. But that was exactly what Sophia did. And it started with a single, earth-shattering choice. She ended her engagement. Not with a speech. Not with a calm explanation. Not even with the diplomacy you'd expect from a corporate powerhouse. She walked straight into the Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala, the place where reputations were polished and flaunted, and she announced, publicly, that she was done with Alexander Reeves. Done with his manipulation. Done with his cold ambition. Done with allowing him to frame her motherhood as a liability. It hit the city like a scandalized whisper spreading through every high society circle in minutes. But Sophia didn't care. She didn't look back, because ending her engagement wasn't her real rebellion. The real one happened the next morning. In a boardroom filled with people who had thrived on her exhaustion and profited off her emotional absence, Sophia walked in, spine straight, face steady, and said 6 words that changed everything. You're terminated, effective immediately, all of you. She removed every board member who had used her scandal to manipulate her. She signed the paperwork without trembling. She issued memos that dismantled the culture of fear she had once helped build. Then she fired the legal team that tried to spin Emma as a PR tool. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't theatrics. It was a woman setting fire to the parts of her life that kept her small and scared. But even as she tore down the structure around her, she hadn't yet confronted the 2 people who had put cracks in her long before she ever held a CEO title. Her parents. When they arrived at her penthouse, furious and ready to re-establish the control they'd always had. Sophia didn't bow this time. She didn't let them speak over her. She didn't shrink. "Emma is my daughter," she said, her voice steady even as her hands shook. "And I will not let you hurt her or define her." Their faces twisted with disbelief, with betrayal, with the realization that the daughter they raised to obey had finally outgrown them, her mother. Hissed, "You're throwing away everything for a child who isn't even—" "Enough," Sophia snapped, and I later learned it was the first time she had ever spoken to them that way. "This conversation is over." She shut the door in their faces. For good. But victories like these come with heavy fallout. The tabloids exploded again. Reporters camped outside her office, her phone flooded with threats, demands, and gossip. Within days, she began unraveling. She worked late. She stopped sleeping. She cried in her office bathroom stall, something she later admitted she hadn't done since she was 16. And she started staring at the London relocation papers she'd received weeks earlier, the offer she had previously ignored. It would solve everything, fix the scandal, restore her reputation, erase the mess. All she'd have to do was leave again. I didn't know any of this until the night Emma overheard her through the apartment wall. Sophia's voice thin and trembling as she told her lawyer she was considering accepting the London job permanently. Emma's reaction was instant and devastating. She grabbed her tiny backpack, stuffed in her favorite book and her stuffed rabbit, and ran out the door before I could stop her. She raced through the evening streets, her small figure swallowed by the city, heading instinctively toward the one place she believed she needed to be: Sophia's office. By the time security found her curled up outside the glass doors, she was sobbing so hard her tiny shoulders shook. And when Sophia arrived, breathless, terrified, and convinced she had destroyed everything, Emma ran into her arms like she'd been waiting her entire life for that moment. "Please don't leave me again," Emma cried. "I promise I'll be good. I won't listen to mean kids. Just please, please don't go." Sophia fell to her knees, holding her daughter as though anchoring herself to the only truth that mattered. Her tears soaked Emma's hair. Her apologies spilled out in choked fragments. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered over and over, like she was trying to convince both Emma and herself. "I'm not leaving. Not again. Not ever." I arrived minutes later and saw them on the floor, mother and daughter in a tangle of tears and desperation, clinging to each other like two pieces of a story finally reunited after years of being torn apart. For the first time, I saw Sophia not as the woman who ran from motherhood, but as the woman terrified of failing at it. And she made her vow right there, breathless and trembling. "I choose Emma. I choose her over everything." But as I watched her hold our daughter like she was learning how to breathe again, one question burned quietly in the back of my mind. She chose us today, but could she choose us tomorrow? Could she truly change her life? For good, for Emma? Only time would tell. There are sacrifices people talk about, the kind that sound noble, poetic, even admirable when summed up in a sentence. And then there are the sacrifices that can't possibly fit into words because they require a person to dismantle the life they built with their own ambition. I never expected Sophia to choose the second type, but she did. And the day she walked away from billions, from a penthouse in the sky, from a corporate throne she'd spent her entire adulthood climbing toward, that was the day I realized just how far she was willing to go for our daughter. She sold her majority shares. The company she once ran with a grip of steel and precision became, overnight, something she no longer controlled. Reporters spun it as scandal. Investors called it madness. Her parents called it betrayal. But Sophia simply called it necessary. Once the paperwork was signed, she packed her penthouse, this palace of glass and loneliness, and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment exactly 4 blocks from ours. No doorman, no elevator opening onto a private foyer. no floor-to-ceiling view of a skyline she once believed defined her success. Her new space was warm, small, human, and for the first time, she didn't hide behind luxury. She learned to exist in the quiet. Co-parenting started slowly, cautiously. I wasn't ready to hand everything over, not after the wound still healing in Emma. But Sophia showed up. Consistently, predictably, gently. We created a schedule, color-coded on the fridge. Mondays, science projects at her place. Thursdays, dinners at mine. Weekends, flexible, based on Emma's comfort, not our convenience. Sophia learned routines the hard way. Lunches that needed notes inside. Hair that needed braiding. Nightlights that needed to be turned on before bedtime stories. I watched her struggle at first. Burning grilled cheese, losing track of Emma's school forms. Braids that looked more like tangled vines than hairstyles. But she never quit. She laughed at herself. Let Emma teach her. Let me teach her. And slowly, she began unlearning everything her own parents taught her about perfection. Sophia allowed herself to be imperfect, allowed herself to be corrected, humbled, softened. One afternoon, I walked in to pick Emma up and found Sophia sitting on the floor surrounded by hair ties, books, and spilled juice, while Emma giggled beside her. Sophia didn't apologize for the mess. She just smiled up at me and said, "We're practicing braids. It's not going well." And somehow, that honesty meant more to me than anything she'd done as a CEO. In time, Emma's walls began to fall away. Her nightmares faded. Her trust grew. The tension in her small shoulders disappeared, replaced by that easy brightness she'd once carried everywhere she went. It helped that life around her kept moving forward too, especially when Sarah, Emma's teacher, became something more for me. It happened quietly, naturally. A conversation that turned into coffee, which turned into shared laughter, which turned into something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Hope for myself, separate from fatherhood. When I told Sophia, I expected jealousy or discomfort, maybe even resentment. Instead, she looked at me with genuine warmth and said, "She's wonderful with Emma. I'm glad you have someone." She meant it. For the first time, she wasn't competing with her past, or with me, or with anything. She was simply respecting the life Emma and I had built, and trying to belong without breaking it. Healing wasn't dramatic anymore. It wasn't loud. It was in the quiet moments. Emma laughing during bedtime stories, Sophia helping with homework, Sarah joining us for dinners without tension knotting the air. It was in the way our daughter started walking with a lightness I hadn't seen in years, as if she finally believed she was surrounded by people who wouldn't disappear on her. And then came the moment that felt like the universe pausing, holding its breath, not for drama, but for grace. I had dropped Emma off at Sophia's place for their usual Thursday night. When I returned later to pick her up, I walked through the open doorway and heard Emma's voice. Soft, steady, sure of itself. She ran across the room, arms full of drawings, and said it without hesitation, without fear, without testing the word, but claiming it. "Mama, look." Sophia froze. Her eyes filled instantly, her breath catching as she lowered herself onto her knees. Emma placed the drawings in her hands, as though she had always known exactly where they belonged. And in that moment, watching my daughter give that title freely, after years of pain, I felt something shift permanently in all of us. For the first time, Emma called her Mama, and nothing about our broken, rebuilt, imperfect family would ever be the same again. There's a strange kind of beauty in watching broken pieces form a picture you never thought you'd see. For so long, our lives had felt like scattered fragments. My fear, Sophia's guilt, Emma's confusion. But slowly, quietly, almost without us noticing, those jagged edges began fitting into something that looked a lot like a family. Not the kind found in picture frames or storybooks. Ours was different, messier, hard-won, but somehow stronger than anything we had before. Co-parenting stopped feeling like negotiation and started feeling like rhythm. Schedules weren't battles anymore. They were bridges. Emma's stability stopped teetering and found balance. Mornings became predictable in the way children need. Sophia braided Emma's hair on days she stayed with her. I packed lunches with handwritten notes on mine. And on the days Sarah, the woman who had quietly become my partner, walked Emma to school, Emma practically glowed with pride because she felt surrounded, supported, and for the first time in her life, completely safe. Her teachers noticed it immediately. Her reading jumped an entire level. Her confidence in class bloomed. She started volunteering answers, raising her hand, helping kids who used to tease her. Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "Whatever's happening at home, keep doing it. Emma's thriving." It wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was consistency. Something she'd never had from both parents at the same time. Science day at Sophia's apartment became sacred. Beakers, food coloring experiments, ocean documentaries, messy projects that stained countertops, but made memories Emma carried everywhere she went. Sophia no longer hovered anxiously, terrified of doing something wrong. She let herself laugh at the failures, celebrate the smallest successes, and sit patiently through Emma's endless questions. She showed up even on the days she doubted herself, and that was what made Emma finally believe her mother wasn't going to vanish again. For the first time, Emma slept through the night at Sophia's without waking up from nightmares. For the first time, she returned home confident, not clingy. For the first time, she bounced between our two homes with joy instead of fear. I had expected to feel replaced, overshadowed, or pushed out. But none of that happened. Instead, watching Sophia step into motherhood gave me something I didn't realize I'd been missing. Permission to breathe. Permission to stop carrying everything alone. Permission to build something for myself, too. Sarah became part of that new balance, not as a substitute mother, not as competition, but as another safe person in Emma's world, another adult who saw her, understood her, and adored her without conditions. Sophia supported it without a hint of resentment. If anything, she appreciated that Emma had more love, not less. We became a strange sort of quartet. One biological father, one biological mother, one stepmother, and a little girl who held all of us together without even trying. Dinners together weren't tense. Holidays weren't territorial. We created boundaries, respected roles, and let go of the scorekeeping that had once ruined us. Emma noticed. Children always notice. One evening, near the beginning of spring, I picked her up from Sophia's apartment. She came running out with paint on her sleeves, her backpack bouncing with each step, excitement practically radiating from her. "Daddy, we learned how coral reefs heal themselves," she said breathlessly. "Did you know they can grow back stronger after they're damaged?" Her analogy didn't escape me. Not anymore. Not with everything we'd lived through. Over dinner that night, Sarah asked Emma how school was going. Emma grinned in a way that made the whole room feel warmer. "We're writing essays," she said. "They're supposed to be about second chances." I watched something flicker across her face. Something thoughtful, almost secretive. Sarah asked, "What did you write about?" Emma closed her notebook quickly, hugging it to her chest with a playful smile. "You'll see at the presentation," she said. "It's a surprise." I exchanged a look with Sophia across the table, curious, uncertain, maybe even a little emotional. But Emma didn't budge. Her eyes sparkled with the kind of anticipation only a child deeply proud of her words can hold. She had written something important, something real, something she wasn't ready to share yet. And as her teacher announced the presentation date, as Emma giggled and changed the subject, as the three adults who loved her more than life itself smiled at her across the table, I felt it. We weren't repairing the past anymore. We were building something stronger than before. But what had Emma written? What truth had she found on her own? Her essay was ready, sealed, secret, waiting, and none of us knew what she was about to reveal. Some moments strike you so deeply you feel them settle into your bones. Moments when a child, your child, stands in front of a room full of strangers and somehow tells your story better than you ever could. I thought I was prepared for Emma's school presentation. I thought it would be cute, maybe touching. But the truth is, nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment my 9-year-old daughter stepped up to that wooden podium and made an entire auditorium fall silent. And then cry. The place was buzzing before the event began. Parents chatting, cameras flashing, teachers giving last-second encouragements. Sophia sat to my right, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Sarah sat to my left, smiling gently at Emma as she waited in the third row with her classmates. For the first time, the four of us were together in public without fear, without scandal, without tension. A real family, even if not a traditional one. When Emma finally stepped up to the microphone, wearing a purple dress that matched the notes Sophia tucked into her lunches, the room shifted. She stood so straight, so steady, so sure of herself that it almost didn't match the little girl who once cried herself to sleep, afraid someone might disappear again. She cleared her throat, unfolded her paper, and began. My essay is called "The Fish Who Learned to Come Home." A few parents chuckled softly at the title, but Emma didn't. She dove right into her story in that clear, thoughtful voice she had grown into over the past few years. Once there was a fish who lived in very deep water, she read. So deep that she had to make her own light, because it was dark everywhere around her. The fish was brave and smart, but she was also scared. Scared she wasn't good enough, scared she would break things, scared she would never shine bright enough. Sophia inhaled quietly beside me. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I could feel the emotion radiating through her. Emma continued. One day, the fish had a baby fish. Tiny and perfect. But the mama fish didn't know how to be a mama. No one ever taught her. And because she was afraid, she swam far away, all the way to another ocean. You could hear the gasp ripple through the crowd. Children didn't usually write essays like this. They didn't speak in metaphors that held the weight of real lives. But Emma did. The baby fish grew up with her daddy fish, she said. He didn't live in the deep ocean. He lived in warm, bright waters. He taught her how to be kind and how to be brave. He taught her that even if something breaks, you can still fix it with enough love. I felt my throat tighten. Sarah reached for my arm and squeezed gently. But the mama fish missed her baby, Emma went on, her voice softening. Even though she tried to hide from it, even though she tried to pretend the deep water was enough. It wasn't. Not even close. She took a breath, steadying herself as if she knew the next part mattered most. So the mama fish came back. She didn't come back perfect. She didn't come back fearless. But she came back trying. And day by day she learned how to stay. Sophia pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. I saw tears escape down her cheeks. Emma glanced toward her, just for a moment, not seeking approval, but acknowledging truth. And then, Emma continued, something amazing happened. The baby fish realized she didn't lose anything when her family changed. She gained more love, a daddy fish, a mama fish, and a stepmama fish who helped her grow even more. Sarah's breath caught. Emma smiled in her direction. Some people think a family has to look one way, she said. But families aren't pictures. They're stories, and stories can have lots of characters. The auditorium was silent, so quiet I could hear the crackle of the speakers. My family learned to be a school of fish, Emma said, swimming together, protecting each other, growing stronger after being hurt. We're not perfect, but we're brave, we're together, and we learned that even if someone swims away, they can still learn to come home. She looked up from her paper then, eyes bright, proud, steady, and the room erupted into applause. Parents wiped tears. Teachers whispered to each other. And I realized, standing there between the two women who loved my daughter, that Emma had done something none of us could have done alone. She had rewritten our past into something beautiful enough to carry into the future. Afterward, when we walked out of the school into the golden afternoon light, Emma slipped her hands into ours, one in mine, one in Sophia's, and skipped between us as though she were carrying the weight of none of the pain we once lived through. She glanced up at me suddenly, her smile mischievous and full of possibility. "Daddy?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart? What adventure is next for us?" And in that moment, I realized this wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of a brand new one. If this story touched you the way it touched us while creating it, let me know in the comments what part hit your heart the hardest. Your voice helps bring these stories to life.